Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 39th level of the RPG Cave. Yes, we're doing the 39th level once again, even though you didn't get to hear the first time. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Turford, and I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 elf medic, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Monday evening, good sir?
I'm doing great. I had 2 weeks of rest. Now the camera's all kind of viewed differently. And let me tell you, I'm very jealous of Matt and his Steam Deck. Oh my gosh.
I knew you would be. I knew you would be. Like,
it looks good.
Just be thankful Donnie hasn't seen those pictures yet, because, you know, Donnie would be the real jealous one, because I see him like every day, Garret, being like,
he's poaching.
I'm waiting for my Steam Deck email. I'm waiting for it. He's like tapping his hand.
He has a fishing pole with one of us contacts, because he didn't sign up for the actual alert thing. But he has a bunch of people that are in constant contact. So we're all going to get it eventually.
Although I love the fact that you guys are all excited about the Steam Deck, whereas I'm just excited my Analog Pocket is finally shipping next week. And that's all I need.
That's so cool though. Yeah.
I know. I'm so excited to get that and play some, you know, GBA and Game Boy RPGs on it, because I think it's gonna be an awesome handheld.
Dude, I just went into my Vita, my OLED Vita, and of course I hacked it, went into it a bit more, and it's so much versatility. And once it's hacked, it's probably a standard emulation machine that I always wanted. So it's really, really good.
But the real question is, does it replace the Retroid Pocket in your eyes, Garret?
No, the Retroid Pocket is so, like, the brightness is very good, and the controls themselves, like the D-pad and then the button clicks on there, is very good for the GBA and GBC games. And then Vita, I'll definitely, it'll be much different. It'll probably more PSP, because the Retroid Pocket does not do PSP games that well.
Okay. So, yeah, I was going to say, like, the Vita already does, you know, PSP games really well from the PlayStation Store. So I can't even imagine, you know, having any Game Boy 1 on there. But enough about this. Let's clear the dungeon, because we got to get this show on the road. So first of all, I want to apologize to everyone about there being no show last week. Sean and I actually recorded like a really awesome like tier list episode, and the recording totally broke, and then the backup recording totally broke, and I spent like 6 hours trying to fix it, and it just wasn't going to get fixed. So I do want to apologize for that, but you are getting this week's episode a little bit sooner to kind of make up for that, because we're basically putting this out kind of the day after we're recording this, essentially, rather than waiting until the end of the week to kind of make up for that. But I want to apologize again for kind of going by a past weekend without your RPG fix, because I know y'all are.
We could just blame Sean. It's all Sean's fault, right?
I guess.
I'm just kidding. Love you, Sean.
Love you too, Sean. But of course, though, if you want to support the show, if you like what we do, of course, you can subscribe to us on your podcast feed of choice. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. We're all the places you find podcasts, so check us out where you listen to us. We're even on Amazon Music, apparently. So go listen to us there if you have.
I heard it's Amazon very Music. Good quality there. It's like very high stream quality audio.
It is pretty good.
So there you go.
Of course, if you're also listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you know, leave us a 5-star rating. That would definitely help. Maybe leave us a nice Apple Podcast review. And if you do, we'll read it on the show. Also, if you want to see our beautiful faces every week, head over to YouTube, youtube.com/YumiCapri. We put up a video version of the show over there. And of course, like, subscribe, share, binge, ding, ding, ding. Ring that bell for those notifications. That's what people on YouTube tell you to do. And then last but not least, get early access to this and all of our shows over on Patreon, patreon.com/YumiCapri is how you do that. They're a little tip in the old tip jar, just like our newest patrons, Danae Stallnecker and Chris. Thank you so much to our newest patrons for joining the Yumi Capri family and for supporting the content. We really appreciate you guys. But enough about all that. Let's read from the sacred texts, because it is time, Garret. We did an episode at the beginning of the year called the Big RPG Preview of 2020. And there have been so many RPG announcements. 2022. That's true.
Yes.
And there have been so many RPG announcements since that episode that we needed to update it a little bit. So we're going to kind of go through some of the announcements that came out this year. We're also going to talk about you, the person who's listening to this right now. Maybe it's you, maybe you didn't write in. We're going to talk about your most anticipated RPGs, and then we're going to get to some pretty cool questions. So I think we got a pretty good, cool show, Garret. So
Sounds
I think
good.
we're going to start off, and we're going to kind of go out of order in this case as far as, well, I mean, our list is going to be in order, but I mean, we're going to go out of order from like when this news came in. Yeah. We're going to kind of go all over the place with this one. So we're going to start with Live Alive. We saw this during the Nintendo Direct, the most recent one that happened.
Yes.
By the time we're recording this, and of course, it's going to be a Nintendo Switch exclusive coming on July 22nd. This game was actually originally a Super Famicom game that was released in Japan only on September 2nd, 1994. And it was actually directed by Takashi Tokita, who actually directed both Chrono Trigger and Parasite Eve. We talked about him on the Chrono Trigger episode. So you can go back and listen to that, as well as a whole bunch of other talented folks who a lot of people who worked on Chrono Trigger also worked on Live Alive. And then kind of the gameplay kind of like emulates that a little bit, but it's kind of a unique story to it. But Garrett, where's your hype level on Live Alive? What do you think about this one?
I couldn't believe this game actually existed before, let alone releasing this year exclusively on Nintendo Switch. I find it fascinating. This is Square Enix. And Square Enix, I don't know what they're doing this year, but they're loving their RPGs. And they're loving not only the big ones, but the much smaller ones, the HD 2D ones, the turn-based tactical ones, like even exclusively to Nintendo Switch and elsewhere. I'm very surprised. Alive looks very, very cool. It reminds me of Triangle Strategy, which I'm sure Triangle Strategy had inspirations from Alive with all the different type of storylines and whatever. It looks like this one's much more disparate because they're in much different time periods. It's like different games essentially in each and every one of them.
The way I would actually put it is it's actually similar to Octopath Traveler, but instead of you going to different places and then recruiting all the party members and then them kind of like doing their own stories, it's similar to that, but it takes place in different time periods.
Got it.
And you play as a different character in each time period. And then eventually towards the end of the game, they all converge into one storyline. Unlike Octopath Traveler, where those just
you kind of just meet up. That's what I meant. Octopath Traveler, not Triangle Strategy. But yeah, okay, cool. That sounds good. I'm interested to see how they converge together. Some time jump, I'm sure, similar to Chrono Trigger. I like the art style very much. That HD 2D magic. That it looks very nice. But yeah. It might be a day one purchase. It might be maybe a little bit later than that. We'll see. But I'm very excited for it coming out on Nintendo Switch.
Nice. Yeah, I'm actually really excited about this one too. I never played the original game. I mean, I've imported, like I have a physical copy of this game from Japan. But I've never actually played it. It's one of those games that was kind of on my backlog for the longest time because I don't know if you know about the retro clone system, the Retron 5, Garrett, made by Hyperkin, where what's cool about that console is it basically allows you to play, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, NES cartridges, as well as like Game Boy and Game Boy Advance cartridges. But what was cool about it, even though it was an emulation-based console, is it allowed you to apply translation patches to games.
That's super cool. Super nice.
And it was one of the only systems that you'd play on your TV besides, using an emulator on your computer that allowed you to do that. So I actually got like a lot of, Japanese RPGs because they're so much cheaper than the North American versions. Like Chrono Trigger, for example, is like $5 if you import it from Japan.
That's crazy.
Because that game is so common there. So then applying the translation patch just basically makes it the North American version, which is super cool. So I did that with Live Alive, but I just never got around to playing it. Now I'm like, I'm probably just going to wait for this remake to come out because it looks so good that I'm like, I'd rather just, jump into that.
Yeah, especially that HD 2D look going on. They're slowly adopting that, and I can't wait what more games are going to come out in that art style. I'm sure it's going to be a standard template for just remaking these classics for Square Enix.
Not only that, but these games are actually selling pretty well. Like we got just the recent announcement that Triangle Strategy hit 800,000 sales, which doesn't sound like a lot when you compare it to other games, but for a game like Triangle Strategy to sell 800,000 copies in a week and a half, That's pretty good for a game in its particular genre. And it kind of reminds me of what happened with Octopath Traveler, having similar numbers in its first couple weeks. And plus to Square Enix, these games don't need to sell, more than 2 million copies for them to provide them basically double the amount that they put into them essentially. So that's why I think they're going to do much more of these. Obviously we know the Dragon Quest 3 one is coming at some point. I still don't think that's coming out this year.
I hope it comes out this year. It's on my pick.
I'm still thinking it's next
for
year.
Fantasy Critic. Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry I'm ruining your dreams,
heart,
Garret.
Ryan.
I'm sorry.
I got that, and I was stupid to pick Senua Sacrifice whatever. I don't know why I did that, and then someone locked it because they anti-picked it. And I'm like, oh no.
Don't feel so bad, Garret. In the Xbox Drive versus the trophy room fantasy draft, with Sean and I versus Joseph and Kyle over at the trophy room, I actually ended up convincing Sean that we should pick Dead Space Remake, and Joe and Kyle counterpicked it, and that game's not coming out till next year either. So I got egg on my face. But to throw it out there, win's a win because they counterpicked us on Kirby. So yeah, I think we're gonna make up for it with that. But yeah, Live Alive is actually in my our fantasy league as well. Sean and I actually ended up picking it, so I'm very excited for this game, and I can't wait for it to come out and finally get a chance to jump into this game that I've heard a lot of good things about, but I've just never played. So July 22nd. Look out for it, and also again, if it follows the kind of Octopath Traveler, Bravely Default kind of path, even if you don't have a Switch, it'll probably come to PC within 6 months, I imagine. And then I imagine it'll also come maybe to Xbox at some point. We'll see, but definitely PC
there's this weird transition, man. They went with Octopath Traveler, went from Switch, PC, then creeped in over to Xbox, and we'll see if they'll do that again with these other RPGs.
I think Triangle Strategy will be the real test. If that shows up on Game Pass and Xbox by the end of the year, I think they'll do that with all the HD2D games.
That would be so cool. And if it's on Game Pass too, that would be a home run. That would be a huge get for Xbox. Yeah. So I still think it's hilarious that Octopath Traveler still isn't even out on PlayStation. It's on Xbox. It's kind of crazy, isn't it?
But it's not on PlayStation. It's so weird to me. But speaking of games that are on PlayStation from Square Enix, just like that segment, it's pretty good. Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers edition, also got announced during the same Nintendo Direct, is actually out very soon on April 7th. I am stoked for this one. Again, I'm actually a big fan of Chrono Cross. It's one of my all-time favorite games. And this remake, well, first of all, it's not really a remake. It's more of just a remaster. It's similar to what Square did with, Final Fantasy VII, the PS1 port, or Final Fantasy 8, 9, or any of the PS1 ports that they've done to modern consoles, where you're going to get, the speed up where you can, move through the game pretty quickly, as well as some of the extra cheats if you want to, go into God mode and stuff like that. There'll be a lot of accessible features. And I'm just really excited to revisit this game again. I've been really hankering, Garret, to replay Chrono Cross for a while now. And now that I know that this remake was coming, I'm like, yep, sign me up. I'll be there day one to re-experience, this game all over again, because I love Chrono Cross and I can't wait to play it. Also, I should note that I'm good. I haven't told Garret about this yet. But I'm planning on us doing maybe a bonus episode, maybe a canonical episode about Chrono Cross that should launch the same week. Where we just talk about it in the same way we normally talk about, games on the show. So I'm excited to talk about what Garret. I'm more excited to hear about you on this one because you've never played Chrono Cross before. So what do you think about this one?
I'm glad it's coming to Switch and other consoles. I'm glad it's a current gen thing, or else I would have to emulate it somehow. Or isn't it on? No, wait, I have it on PS Vita, right?
It is on the Vita store. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm very excited to see what this game is all about. It always sounded like it was a spiritual successor, or it is a successor of Chrono Trigger. I very much enjoyed Chrono Trigger last year. And it was like, oh, if you love Chrono Trigger, you love Chrono Cross too. I was like, Chrono Cross, I never really even heard of it. And then I looked into like the trailers and like stuff like that, and it's like, it looks pretty different. It looks like face value, it looks really different. So, but I'm very excited to give it a try. And also, the reason why it's called the Radical Dreamers edition is because of that Japan only exclusive novel. Oh gosh, no. It's the Teleview. Oh no. But yeah, that will be included with the Chrono Cross game. I'm very excited to see how this, and it's a good price point too. It's like only like $20 or 25 or something like
$20.
That's a good price, and I'm glad that they keep that price for this game. So yeah, very excited.
The hilarious thing about Chrono Cross is it's actually a fairly common PS1 game. So the price for it on the Switch is basically the same price to buy a physical copy for PlayStation 1 because they made so many of them.
Gotcha.
So it's actually a pretty cheap title. But just to throw it out there for fans of Chrono Trigger that have never played this game, I will say that yes, it is a spiritual successor, but it is also a direct sequel because the story ties into Chrono Trigger, but it's much later in the game. So just be aware that that even though it seems like it's not, like it seems like it's totally a different thing, because it's all about it basically, it takes, instead of doing the time travel element, you're going between dimensions essentially is how this game works. But the story really ties into Chrono Trigger. So likewise, you'll also get more out of this if you played Chrono Trigger as well. So make sure you play it first, obviously, before playing this. And then the Radical Dreamers, like text-based adventure, which was on Satellaview, actually kind of bridges the gap between the two games really well as well.
Oh, cool.
But again, I haven't actually played it myself. I've just know from other people who played it that's kind of how, like, he talks about the story about how some of the characters interact with some of the other Chrono Trigger characters, and that's kind of how it ties the games together in a nice way. So it's cool to finally have that in one package. But yeah, next up though, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's out this September. They didn't give an exact release date, just September at some point. This trailer looked pretty cool, but I'm just excited to just know more about this game in particular. I mean, they've been talking about how it's kind of like unifying the two Xenoblade timelines together.
Kind of, yeah.
In an interesting way. But I want to know what the resident Xenoblade expert of the two of us has to say about this one, Garrett. I mean, hey, you've at least finished the Xenoblade games, whereas I haven't. So,
I have not played the second one to its fullest extent. I got a good ways away, and then I kind of stopped, and I need to restart and play it again. But we predicted this, like this was kind of in the cards. Seeing it, coming in around later this year or sometime next year. So yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It very much looks like a Xenoblade Chronicles game. I'm very excited to see more gameplay. I'm excited to see what they learned from both games. And actually, the DLC was very good on the definitive edition. I'm very glad that they did that. And so I wonder how they're going to bring this all together, and hopefully, I wouldn't say the end, but a conclusion of this huge major story arc that is Xenoblade Chronicles. And hopefully Monolith Soft has enough chops to go somewhere else, or try a different game. I know a lot of people out there who are mega fans of Xenoblade. They're very, very excited for this game this year. So I'm rooting for them. And I definitely would love to play Xenoblade Chronicles 2 before this game. We'll see if I actually do that. That'll be a huge hurdle to overcome before September. Yeah. But along with these other games. It's a tiny game,
Garrett. I'm sure it won't, take you, 80 to 90 hours to finish. It's fine. It's fine. But,
that sounds like an Elden Ring. No doubt.
I love how we're like quantifying games and play times in the number of Elden Rings that it,
it's about a Persona 5. How about that?
a little bit less than that's even longer 5. Than Elden Ring.
That's true.
But,
that's true.
Yeah, with this game, I'm cautiously optimistic because I want the performance issues on Switch that we're in 2 to kind of be ironed out. And like, it's got to run better than, 540p at barely 30 frames per second, like, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 did. So
it was rough.
I'm hoping that it runs well. because I think that these games are fun. So yeah, I'm also excited about it. Will I pick it up day one? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on how much I really care about obtaining a physical copy of it, because I know they're going to go fast and then you'll never see them again.
They're going to go super expensive.
Yeah.
Xenoblade Chronicle physical copies are crazy. If you got the special editions of those, you've made quite a good investment now, because they're selling like hotcakes. I
do have the special edition for the definitive edition for 1, Garrett. So,
oh wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
It's up on my shelf, but yeah. So we'll see September at some point. Who knows? Maybe it'll be September 27th, like our next game, The Legend of Heroes: Trails from Zero. So first of all, we got the announcement that this was coming finally to North America for the very first time. And it's coming on September 27th, 2022. This is a game that I know Legend of Heroes fans are very excited to play, because it's going to finally be in English. Whereas again, I'm just not a huge Legend of Heroes person, because I just haven't played a lot of the games, to be honest. We talked about that, when we did that Neon Falcom episode. So if you want to know our thoughts about the series, go back and listen to that. But I know a lot of people are excited about this. Maybe this is the one I jump into. Maybe I just go back and play Trails of Gold Steel first. But Garrett, where's your hype level on this one?
It's not anywhere. These series intimidate me, man. I see Legend of Heroes and I just want to run away, because it's just like 12 games that are like at least like 60 to 70 hours long. And I'm like, guys, I can't do this. I got to start out with Trails of Cold Steel 1 first on my laptop, and then I'll try the other games. So my hype level for this, I'm glad for the Legend of Heroes fans. I'm very glad and I'm glad that Neon Falcom is actually porting these and putting voice casting in these for English dub. That's kind of actually, they didn't need to do that at all. So I'm glad that they're doing it. So yeah, I'm excited for them. I'm not excited much at all. Yeah, for this game.
Well, none of that too. This isn't also the first game that they're doing this with. We also have a couple other Trails of games that didn't come out here in North America that they are also releasing as well. We just don't have the release dates for them yet. And I would imagine they're probably like early to middle 2023 games, I would imagine. So if this is coming out in September, but yeah, I know people are excited about this one, and maybe we contract someone to play this game for us, and then we talk about it on the show, because we might talk about that later. But next up, a game that I think Garrett and I think it's safe to say both of us are pretty excited about this next one. Soul Hackers 2, August 26th. Get hyped, everybody. I'm very excited about this one. This game is coming to PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and PC. And the reason why I listed the platforms and thought this was interesting is that, fun fact, this will be the very first game from Atlas since the Xbox 360 era, which was their last game was 2014's Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, which, funny enough, they just re-released, Garrett, and it didn't come to Xbox. So it's just like, because they had that, and they also had Catherine on 360, which also got a remake, which also didn't come to Xbox. So it's weird that this game that's actually a sequel to a 3DS, a 3DS game.
The 3DS game was a remake of was it a PS2 game? Is that my understanding, or PS1? The Soul Hackers. I'm blanking on it.
I think it's.
I think it's PS2. I think it's PS2.
We talked about it on the Atlas episode. I know that for sure.
Yes, we did. PlayStation. It's just PlayStation.
Oh, so it's PS1. PS1.
And Sega Saturn? I guess it came on Sega Saturn as well.
That makes sense, because they were on the same. Those two consoles were in the same era, so it was a Sega Saturn PS1 game. Which again, that version only came out in Japan, so we didn't actually get it here. And then we got the remake here on 3DS.
Yeah, on 3DS.
But now we've got a sequel to it that's not on Switch, even though the last one was on 3DS. Even though the last one before that was on Sega hardware. And then it's also coming to Xbox, of all places, which is just hilarious to think about. And not only that, they completely changed the entire look and style of this game from the last one. So it's like almost like a totally different series. It's just being called Soul Hackers 2. I'm sure it'll probably play into the story of Soul Hackers like the first one. But still, it's just weird to kind of see. And I have some theories about this, but Garrett, I want you to tell me about where you're at with this one.
I have no idea what's going on in Atlas. They are smoking something because they are just putting out platforms and games left and right. They're putting Persona 4 like the Ultimate Arena, whatever, on Switch, but not putting Soul Hackers 2 on Switch and not announcing ports over to Switch. And then Soul Hackers is coming to Xbox. Like, what is going on here? Okay. All that aside, it looks great. It looks really, really cool. It looks like an adult kind of Persona game, but it doesn't look as hard as Shin Megami Tensei or dark or twisted as them. Even Shin Megami Tensei is school related. It's some sort of school student orientated story, whereas Soul Hackers 2 does not. It's all just adults in their own little, jobs.
Yeah, it kind of actually reminds me of Persona 2 in a big way, especially Eternal Punishment, because it's more, that game in particular is more centered around adults versus, a school in particular.
I like the protagonist's character design very much. I think they show her off very well. It's a really cool design. Well, it's got a female
protagonist too, which I think is actually pretty big for an Atlas game. We don't see it very often.
And it's like a futuristic Neo kind of setting going on, right? So, and I love the look of this game. I can, seeing from the gameplay, I understand not coming to Switch. I don't want them to release something that's not working well, not running well on Switch. And I think there was somewhere in the interview or a couple of interviews, they're like, hey, yeah, we play tested on Switch and it was just very hard to run it. Even compared to Xbox One, which I was like, okay, sounds good. Okay, whatever. But yeah, very excited for Soul Hackers 2. This was unexpected. This was another Atlas release. And I'm like, this is not Persona. And there's a game releasing on an Xbox and it's coming out in August. It's coming out very soon. So
yeah. And cool. It's a worldwide release too. It's not coming out in Japan first or anything, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So we're getting it at the same time, which doesn't happen very often with Atlas games.
You blow my mind, Atlas. With these decisions, but
so first off, I want to mention, and this kind of goes back to your point about it being play tested on Switch and not running well. This is the very first game from Atlas also coming to current gen platforms, so PS5 and Series X as well.
That's a good call.
And I think that just has to do with the gameplay. Now, again, just because it doesn't run well on Switch doesn't necessarily mean it's going to run well on base Xbox One, Garrett, because we've seen plenty of games come out recently that maybe release on Xbox One, base Xbox One, like Elden Ring, for example, but don't run very well on that console.
You definitely don't want to play that on that console.
So I would imagine that it's possible that happens there. Obviously, it's Atlas. Who knows? Maybe they find a way to make it work. But I think the fact that it's on current gen consoles, I think they must be doing some stuff kind of behind the scenes with the game to make it where maybe it just pushed it slightly outside the system's spec range a little bit.
It might be one of those engine practice testing games where it's all right, this is not going to be our Persona game, but we want to push our engine chop capabilities, our design capabilities. So we're going to, we're going to target this. We're going to target this certain, technical capabilities or whatever and see where we land. And this is where they land. They can only do current and past gen consoles and not Switch. So
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's entirely possible also that it's the engine itself, again, is kind of like a practice one almost for Persona 6, whenever that undoubtedly comes out, which will obviously probably be on PS5 and have a PS5 version.
Definitely on PS5 and PS4. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, probably not on Switch, Garrett, anyway. So, I would imagine
holding
that.
On a hope.
Because we saw something similar with Catherine, because that was the whole story of how Catherine got made as a game in the first place, was because they used it was made on a brand new engine that was specifically being tested out, so that then they could use that same engine in Persona 5, essentially. So that was the whole reason they even made that game. So it's just, it's interesting to see. So imagine it may be a similar situation here because it is in-house Atlas developing. It's not Persona team, but in-house Atlas that's doing it. Because I do think Persona 6 is it might actually be coming out next year. I still think
it might be coming out very soon. Yeah.
But I might in Japan only, and then it'll eventually come here in 2024, Garrett. So there you go.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Next up, a game that I'm pretty sure it's only me that's super excited about this. Maybe you too, Garrett, but it's definitely me because I'm a big fan of the Valkyrie profile games. I basically played them for the very first time this year. And finally, for the first time since the Nintendo DS, we are getting a new game in the Valkyrie profile series called Valkyrie Elysium, which is actually going to be a prequel. It's set before Ragnarok happens because all of the Valkyrie profile games take place after Ragnarok. Essentially, is kind of like reset the world in a big way because Ragnarok's kind of like the Norse kind of end of the world, like doomsday thing. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. The only thing I'm kind of sad about is the fact that they are changing the gameplay style for this one. It is going to be an action RPG rather than a turn-based RPG. Yes. Because one of the things that was really cool about the Valkyrie profile games is they were basically like side-scrolling platforming games with Metroidvania elements. But then when you ran into enemies, it would go into turn-based combat with your 4 party members, and they were each assigned to the 4 face buttons, and you got to do all kinds of cool combos with your party members. So I really love the style and the play style of Valkyrie profile. And they kind of moved away from it with the DS Valkyrie profile game because that's more of like a Fire Emblem that has like a similar combat system essentially where it's all grid based, and as you go run into people on the grid, you'll then initiate in that Valkyrie profile combat. So I'm a little sad that it's an action RPG, but I'm just excited they're making a new game in the series because I can't wait to play this one. Even though I know a lot of people weren't, super excited about this one, I personally was. But Garrett, where do you sit on Valkyrie Elysium?
It kind of looks like a carbon copy of Nier. It's giving me Nier vibes for sure. It's because of that action RPG type of thing. Now, when I was looking at that gameplay, it didn't seem too enticing to me compared to I just had a lot of resemblances with Nier. So I don't have any history with the Valkyrie profile or whatever series. So I'm going to be on the lookout for this, see the gameplay a little bit more. Do we know which studio is working on it? Okay.
It's someone.
It's an interesting thing. I wonder why Square Enix pulled this out of the well and decided to make an action RPG off of this.
It actually really reminds me of Trials of Mana a lot more than Nier actually. And especially the combat in particular, it doesn't look as fast paced as something like Nier. I think it actually looks much closer to the combat that we saw in Trials of Mana. So I'm actually thinking it might even be the same studio that did that game might actually be doing this one.
Cool.
So that's what it reminded me of more. And the fact that, again, same idea where they take a franchise that's been long dead, like the Mana series, and then do another game in it, even though it's a remake. Like that remake was like the Trials of Mana remake was completely different than the original game. So even though this isn't a remake, I think it's a similar situation with Valkyrie Elysium, which is why it's obvious just by the visuals and stuff that they're obviously not pouring a ton of money into this one. So if it doesn't sell well, it doesn't sell well. But I think they're maybe testing the waters with this one for maybe doing maybe even a bigger release. So just like they did with Trials of Mana, I think it's the same in the same boat. I think.
Yeah, it's definitely testing the water, see if people would be enticed to get this type of game. It's interesting that they did an action RPG route as well, because of the legacy of the Valkyrie profile games being turn-based. Maybe they just think it would fit well with the studio that's making it so. And instead of making, a brand new franchise or brand new whatever, it's like, oh, why don't you just grab the previous characters not characters, but previous franchise and character kind of designer and story or whatever, and just adopt it to your game. And so that's what they did. I'm interested to see what this looks like
more as well. Like I think we're going to see more of this type of thing from Square, because I think they're testing the waters on a lot of franchises. I wouldn't be surprised if we see other franchises that have been long dormant. Maybe a Vagrant story comes back. Maybe a Parasite Eve, maybe some other stuff that's been long, dormant from the PS1 or PS2 era from Square. I think all of those are like with between this and Live Alive. I think there is the potential for like any old Square franchise to be brought back at this point. Maybe even maybe even the Chrono series, maybe the Chrono Cross, re-release is kind of, testing a return for maybe the Chrono series to return, maybe with a third entry at some point. So
maybe they're finding something for these franchises to regurgitate them. And it seems like, I don't know, like this year, it feels like they want a lot of games, or they're trying to fill some gaps in between. That it certainly felt like that with that. This came out, announced in the PlayStation Direct, the State of Play. And it's like the last 2 games are Square Enix RPGs that are coming out this year. It's like, man, Square Enix is really, I don't know, they're pulling out some deals, or they're just trying to get, fill in some gaps in the year with RPGs, which is great. It's awesome.
They got to make up some of the money that was lost from Babylon's Fall, Garrett, because nobody's playing that game.
What's Babylon's Fall? I never heard of that game.
I love
Platinum. Oh my gosh.
That's a joke that just never gets old, Garrett. I love it. Oof, but also I think a lot of that just has to do with I think a lot of these games, like the earlier Square Enix games, like Triangle Strategy, I'm pretty confident that was actually supposed to come out last year. Originally, that was probably in the original development plans. Like I think a lot of their games just got shifted because of COVID, and now we're seeing a lot more of them come out because we're starting to catch up again. We're I think Valkyrie Elysium and then the next game we're about to talk about were originally supposed to be kind of their 2022 games, and going from there.
Sounds good.
Speaking of that other game, Garrett, we should talk about it. The Diofield Chronicle. This is a new IP from Square Enix. So this is actually being developed in collaboration between Square Enix and Landcars. We know them, favorite. We've talked about them on the show, makers of Monarch and other games that we've talked about on the show. Games. But and we don't know. I mean, again, I don't think we know enough about it now to know, who's the lead studio. I imagine actually Landcars is probably the lead studio on this one. Spearheading it,
for sure.
Yeah. But what's also interesting as well is they have a bunch of talent from a bunch of other games as well. They've got the art director who did all the character designs for, a lot of the core Final Fantasy games, basically all of them between Final Fantasy 9 to 13, essentially. He basically did all the character designs for all those games, as well as you've also got 2 sound composers from Game of Thrones, basically composing all of the music from this game, as well as all of the sound effects, which is really interesting, which is pretty cool to look at. But this is also just nebulously coming out this year as well. But it's an interesting looking game because, first of all, I don't think the visuals really blew anyone away. No. But the combat looks interesting to me anyways, because it's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of a game like Ogre Battle, where it's essentially a real-time strategy game where you've got units on a map. And they're all kind of like your characters in your party, and you move them towards your enemy like you would in a real-time strategy game. But as you get closer to the enemy, it kind of slows down. The combat slows down, and it becomes like almost like a turn-based battle, essentially, which is pretty cool. And then your characters have different abilities, and depending on some of your abilities, you're able to move across the map sooner. They showed this person on horseback that had like a charge ability to kind of like zoom towards the enemy and kind of hit him with a lance, which is pretty cool. So I'm interested to see how combat's going to play out in this game. But I wasn't, super wowed with this one. This is more of a wait and see for me, Garrett. But what do you think about this?
I'm very surprised to see this. I actually draw a lot more similarities to Triangle Strategy with just the setting and the art style and everything like that. But yeah, the combat is very unique. As you said, you described it pretty well with that. Ogre Battle is basically real-time strategy in terms of like you're moving units in real time, but anytime you can stop them to do some sort of tactical based play. Whether it's like an area effect, buffs, debuffs, it looks like you could just stop and then do some sort of attack or ability or whatever. So other than that trailer, which was like, I don't know, maybe 2-3 minutes tops, it didn't show you really that much. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Our impressions from Monarch and I'm not, putting down lane cars or anything like that. I love the Persona Q series, very much so. But I'm just interested to see how this game goes. And it's
I was going to say very different from their previous games, because a lot of their previous games were like first person dungeon crawling games, or a game like Monarch, which is just, turn-based RPG. So seeing them branch out to do some completely different stuff, I think is really interesting to see. So I'm really interested to see how this turns out anyways.
Yeah, me too. And man, again, Square Enix just coming out with these games this year. It's plentiful of RPGs. There's no dearth of RPGs this year from Square Enix. We're all going to eat plenty. Yeah.
I mean, between Babylon's Fall and Stranger in Paradise, Garrett, it's so many RPGs, because we got to kill chaos.
Stranger in Paradise, I heard it's not that bad.
Yeah.
That's the reviews I'm seeing. It's like, hey guys, it's weird, but it's not that bad.
I've heard it's the most solid, wacky 7 out of 10 you'll ever play in your entire life. So
guys, it's good, but it's a very solid 7. It's the definition of a B tier game or a C tier game. And I'm like, exactly. Cool. Sounds good.
Oh God. All right. But then, Garrett, finally a news story of a game that got announced literally this morning. So it's almost like, CD Projekt Red knew that we were going to record this show today. Although I will say that out of all the games here, this is the only one that isn't coming out this year. But we wanted to talk about it anyways, because they just about announced it today and it's very exciting. So I don't even want to take this announcement away from you, Garrett. I want you to tell me what this is, because I know that you're a big fan, and you got to tell me about this. I'm a
huge fan. So CD Projekt Red announced on Twitter that they are in development a new Witcher game. From my understanding, yay! It's very exciting to see. I was actually not too surprised to see this because of all the rumors going around that they are making a new Witcher game that's not going to be with Geralt. It's going to be a new saga. And you saw the wolf in the winter helmet kind of deal going on, and it says a new saga begins. I'm very happy to see that they're doing brand new characters and brand new things. I don't know when this game is going to come out, man. This is one of those, like, is this going to be a 2027 or 8 game? That's what I'm feeling. It's going to be years before we even probably see a trailer or whatever. I remember Cyberpunk. It came out, or it got announced like in 2014 or something like that. That
trailer,
right?
It was like so long ago. Like it was actually, no, that trailer I think came out before the Xbox One and PS4 came out, actually.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it came out 2013.
I'm pretty sure that it actually got announced before then. But also we got another clue. Oh no, actually it was even earlier. Garrett, do you want to know when it got confirmed?
It got confirmed.
2012. May 2012. Oh my gosh,
when I graduated high school.
Yep. That's hilarious.
Wow, that's crazy.
That was almost exactly like 10 years to the date, actually, which is hilarious to think about.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy.
We did get a clue in how long it'll be, because they're developing it in Unreal Engine 5 rather than the previous engine. And I imagine that any game being developed in Unreal Engine 5 is going to take a while, like 2024 at the earliest, probably. And this, I imagine even longer than that, maybe.
I'm kind of glad that they are switching to Unreal. It's just a more unified engine, and they could bring in more talent. And I'm sure it would be a smooth transition to have support or anything like that, because I think it's just proven over and over again, proprietary engines, while it could be advantageous in certain things, but overall it's just too niche to have a proprietary engine. You're going to have a lot of trouble unless you're the expert. But what if the experts leave? It's like, that's rough. So yeah, I'm glad they're going from the Red engine to the Unreal Engine 5. Yeah. And I imagine, this game might come out earlier or sooner than Cyberpunk, because it's not a brand new franchise. And I don't know the scope of this game. I'm sure they're learning their mistakes from Cyberpunk. So I imagine it could be like a 2026 or 7 game. That's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I imagine it still comes out on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, like that generation of consoles. So, but it'll probably be like the tail end of the console generation, kind of like Cyberpunk was. So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But
and they also promise that they're still developing expansions for Cyberpunk on the Red Engine simultaneously. And people were just wondering, are they abandoning Cyberpunk or whatever? It's like, no, rest assured, they are still giving it expansions for it. And I'm actually very much looking forward to that too. So,
well, not only that, we also know that The Witcher 3 is getting Xbox Series X and PS5 version later this year as well. At some point, like they still are committed to that too. So yeah, I would imagine like this new Witcher game is probably still in early pre-production phases is probably where I would throw this one at this point. But before we go to the listeners, Garrett, I got to ask you now that we've updated things, because I asked you this question the last time we did this exercise, but now that we have this list updated, I believe when I asked you what your most anticipated RPG of the year was at the time, I'm pretty sure you said Starfield, if I'm not mistaken. Has that changed? Has that changed?
That's
Starfield?
Not changed. It's definitely still Starfield after this. I'm very excited for some of these games that are in this list, but man, I'm ready to see the Bethesda coming back. I want to see what they're cooking up at E3. I want to see a huge gameplay trailer. I want to see what Starfield is all about coming November. So yeah, no, I'm very much excited. And also Mario plus Rabbids 2. I'm hesitant now to see if it could come out early next year. They said in fiscal year of their year, which is like, it was
it goes until March essentially.
Goes until March, early next year. Okay, yeah, I can see that being early next year versus this year. Now we haven't seen much of it. So
I mean, I'm only hoping it comes out this year because I want it because it's in my fantasy, Garrett.
It's also my number one pick on Fantasy Critic. Oh gosh,
your number one pick. Oh my God, Garrett.
I know.
For me,
what about you?
It definitely has changed because my answer was also Starfield at the time. Just because I didn't think we had enough scope. Although Triangle Strategy was kind of my runner up essentially. But for me, it's definitely changed. First of all, I think I'm way more excited for Soul Hackers 2 than I am for Starfield. I think that game looks rad. And the fact that we know a release date for it, we've seen some cool looking gameplay. Like I'm kind of all in with that game. I can't wait to play it. Yes, I might even play it on Xbox. We'll see because I need those Achievos, Garrett. But
we need to get the.
Yeah, I gotta support Atlas if they bring a game to Xbox.
We need the Japanese support on Xbox. Like whenever the game comes out on Xbox, get it on Xbox. Like play it on Xbox because they're looking at those numbers, and I'm sure Xbox wants to reel them in. I'm sure they want at least like really good Japanese publisher deals, for sure. So.
And the other one up there is it's kind of a tie for me between Soul Hackers 2 and Valkyrie Elysium. Because again, I'm so excited to see a new Valkyrie profile game, combined with the fact that again, if it plays like Trials of Mana, then I know the gameplay is going to be fun, and I'm just excited to play more. And yes, I could totally be let down by that, but that's just where my hype factor kind of lies right now. But we of course asked for the listeners' most hype releases. We're going to start with Delroy in the Discord, who says Sea of Stars, Final Fantasy 16, LOL, A Man Can Dream, Trails from Zero, and Starfield are what Delroy was looking for. Sea of Stars is another one that like I'm stoked for, and I really hope it makes this year. Because again, it is coming from Sabotage out in Quebec, and they are a smaller studio, so there's a possibility that it still gets delayed. But that's one I'm really excited about. Next up, Marcus O'Neill 79 says, my most anticipated RPG is easily Sea of Stars. Cannot wait. Also, just to Delroy's point about Final Fantasy 16, I'm sorry, Delroy. That game is probably not coming out this year.
No, it's not coming out this year. Sorry.
Yeah. Next up, TPR says, my most anticipated RPG of the year moving forward is Live Alive's remake, hands down. As someone who isn't privy to turn-based RPGs, a lot of JRPG options are turned down for me, but this one looks great. I've never heard of it before, but in the direct, and I'm snagging this unique game in the 2D HD2D style. My answer would have to be Elden Ring as well, but that game also came out, but it really impressed me, of course. I mean, TPR is like one of the biggest fans that I know on the Discord of Elden Ring. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely his most anticipated one going into this year. But that's nice. Excited that you're excited for Live Alive TPR, because I know you don't really love too many turn-based games, but that one looks pretty cool.
I'm surprised for TPR. He's not a huge JRPG person, but Alive, a game that exclusively came on Famicom, is now the most anticipated for you. So nice.
It's also the only game we've talked about today, Garrett, that features cowboys. So there you go.
That's something.
Yep. Sure. And then we got the Muffin Mon, Kevin Ainsworth on the Discord, who says, my most anticipated RPGs are Starfield and Soul Hackers 2. Sounds like he's pretty much in line with us, Garrett. So there you go. But let's party up with the Discord as well, because we got a bunch of other non-related questions as well. We're going to stick with Kevin Ainsworth, who asks, do you think Xbox should try and get Soul Hackers 2 for Game Pass? I'm hoping the community shows Atlas people want their games on this platform. Yeah, that goes back to what I'm saying, Kevin. Like, even if this came to Game Pass, I'd still probably buy it, because I want to send the message that, I want to vote with my wallet and say, hey, I want to see more Atlas games on Xbox. And I hope that this definitely is a sign of things to come, rather than just being a one-off thing from Atlas. And I think Game Pass would be a great move. But I don't know if it needs to be necessarily day one. I think maybe it comes to Game Pass, 3 to 6 months down the line, maybe. But I don't know. What do you think about this one, Garrett?
It reminds me of Scarlet Nexus, right? Another action RPG based JRPG that came out on Xbox as well, and actually featured on Xbox. Like they had the marketing rights, the marketing deals, the demos and special stuff or whatever. And yeah, it came out and it was not on Game Pass. A lot of people thought it was on Game Pass for a few months there. And then they later on and transitioned over to Game Pass just because of I wouldn't say reaction to sales, but just a little bit more push into the sales over there on Xbox. I don't want Soul Hackers 2 to be on Game Pass, at least initially, because I think we need to prove to Atlas that it should be on Xbox. And I don't think the Game Pass is the way to go. I think it's hard for a Japanese-based publisher putting their game on a service that any like us, just these normal gamers that subscribe to these things. I feel like Game Pass there's a lot of games coming to it, and a lot of them are great. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of them, I try them and I'm like, no, it's okay. I want to put this down now. I don't want, these other games to be just lost in ether and lost in the cloud. So initially have the push, initially have them released on Xbox. Let's have the hardcore fan base support it. And then if it proves viable, I think it would be good to do it if they wanted to do it like around winter time or maybe not winter time, maybe like even like December, January, like late December, early January, where we've got our games, we've got our holiday fill. Now let's see what else is on Game Pass. Oh, Soul Hackers 2, that brand new JRPG that looks so cool. I think that would be a little bit much better. So that's what I think.
Cool. Next up, we got Hopple, who asks, how high do you think the chances are, after all the hype and sales, that there will be an Elden Ring movie? Great landscapes like Lord of the Rings, interesting creature designs, and another Ring-like story. Directed by Peter Jackson, which of course has made horror movies in the past before. So Hopple wants to see an Elden Ring directed by Peter Jackson.
Interesting.
Personally, I don't ever see them doing it.
Okay.
But I think it's a cool idea. I like where your head's at on this one, Hopple. But maybe I'm wrong. Garrett, am I wrong? What do you think?
I don't know. You're the one that played Elden Ring quite a bit. Did it have a lot of lore behind it? Did it have a lot of memorable characters behind it?
You have to look for it. And the bosses are memorable, but you don't have a lot of they're not really talking to you or anything like that, except for one or two of them. So it's it's not very structured as far as it's kind of, it's a very abstract game where you kind of have to make your own fun or make your own adventure in a lot of ways. And I feel like it would lose a lot in translation converting it to a movie or a TV series even. Like
I would like
don't get me
to see.
wrong. I think like the idea of putting it in the Elden Ring world would be interesting.
Yeah.
Especially because it's like George R. R. Martin helped create the world. Like I think like they could do something interesting with it, but I don't necessarily. It wouldn't follow the plot of the game or anything like that. I don't think. But sorry, I cut you off, Garrett.
No. I just find Soulsborne games so abstract that to the point of if you try to make it into a show or a movie, you're doing a completely different thing. You're not following any kind of lore or template that was in the game, because the game is the lore of what's surrounding you. And as you said, it's cryptic. You have to search into these side, little things in order to like get something out of it. But it would be cool. I just, maybe you associate it with the Elden Ring per se, but like I'm sure somewhere out there they can make a great movie off of it, but it's not gonna, I don't think it will like, I don't know how much it would market it out or push sales or whatever, because they're already successful. I don't know. I just don't see an Elden Ring movie really coming out at all. In any Soulsborne games really coming out with a movie. It would be cool to see some type of animated show of some kind, like Castlevania. Does a pretty good job of doing like these kind of snippets of stories within that universe. Maybe something like that with Elden Ring or any Dark Souls really, or Bloodborne. That'd be kind of neat, but not a full length movie.
I think it's actually easier maybe to do like a Dark Souls or a Bloodborne movie because those games are just more linear. And it's trying to tell you kind of a progressive story. Whereas again, Elden Ring, you're kind of just all over the place and you can kind of go in whatever order you want to do things in. And again, it's just so much more of an abstract idea. It kind of reminds me, if they tried to do a movie of that, it would really remind me of doing something like the Dungeons and Dragons movie. If you remember that from, the early 2000s, it was really, really, really bad. But because Dungeons and Dragons also is a very kind of abstract experience where you're kind of, making your own adventure as you kind of, your dungeon master is essentially telling you a story essentially. Right. So it doesn't really have its own, plot or characters and stuff like that. And I would imagine an Elden Ring movie kind of being something similar where it would be like, again, they could do one in the world of Elden Ring, but about like a specific set of characters that they try and make you care about. But I don't know how they would go beyond that. But next up, Marcus O'Neill 79 asked a question so good that I'm going to read it on the show, but we're not going to actually answer it on this show because next week's episode is actually going to be based off this question. So Marcus O'Neill asks, I've been ruminating on this one for a while now. Most RPGs take place in fantasy/sci-fi settings. What are some of your favorite non-traditional settings for RPGs? Are there any settings that you haven't seen or unrepresented in the genre that you'd like to see a game take place in? I'd love to see a good Wild West RPG. So Marcus, your wish has been granted. Next week, we're not only going to answer the question about what kind of settings we'd love to see or what some of our non-traditional settings are, but we're also going to talk about our favorite games that exist outside of that as well, because there's a lot of cool games to talk about there that may not get their own episodes. So look out for that next week. So that'll actually be next week's episode, Marcus. But thanks for the question. That's awesome, man. Next up, Delroy asks, do you think the inclusion of RPG mechanics in so many games outside of the genre has been an overall positive? Lately, I've found myself enjoying games but they can do their own thing without the inclusion of some features that seemingly add bloat to the game. So Delroy, I think of this on like a game by game basis, because I think some games really add RPG elements well, and then some don't, especially when it comes to, level scaling and things like that. Sometimes the scaling is totally out of whack by certain points of the game. And maybe sometimes the RPG elements actually push you towards microtransactions. An example that I think of with this is Middle-earth: Shadow of War, which is a game I really liked because it's an open world Lord of the Rings game where you basically play as a ranger and you're basically trying to forge a new ring of power, essentially, to basically stop Sauron, essentially. And I really love the stealth elements in the game, and I like a lot of the stuff with the game. But the RPG elements turn the game to such a grind fest towards the end of the game that it just didn't make it fun. And it really pushed you towards, hey, by the way, you can buy, experience boosters to boost up your level, because this is a thing in a game that isn't really an RPG. Like, it had RPG elements to it that led to the game becoming more grindy than I would have hoped for. So I think there's good with it and there's bad. A game that does it well, I think, is Borderlands, where it's not really like a full RPG, but it has like a lot of really well done RPG elements where it's like teetering on the aspect of being like a hardcore RPG, but then not. And I think it actually does RPG elements really well. So Garrett, what do you think about this question?
It's interesting because I think about this more and more, and it's more recent than ever so before. I'm thinking of franchises like Ubisoft franchises. The Far Cry and Assassin's Creed. They went that route. They went that RPG mechanic route, and it definitely added some value to it, but it definitely added a lot of bloat as well, which made it hesitant for me. And I'm an RPG fan, and I enjoy Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, whereas like before all that bloat, I can understand your sympathy, or I can understand where you're coming from, Delroy. I have some sympathy. I think, as Ryan said, it is a game by game basis. I think some games do it very, very well, and I actually hinge on the side of I'm glad games are putting RPG mechanics into their games, not because they need to per se, but to have some sort of structure, like a leveling up system or skills. And actually, those two things that I just mentioned are probably one of the most adopted features into non-RPGs now, like action adventure games. Definitely has a leveling system, definitely has some skill system, right? Is somewhere in there. And so, I'm glad that they're doing it more and more. I just don't want them, as Delroy put it, as like so bloated, that it's just, that's the game itself. I can understand. It's a balance now.
Yeah, but for sure, especially when you get to like, the 60th hour of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and you're just like, I just want this game to be over with. Please,
right?
Just end it. It's just like, I can understand that, especially because I think I'm on the opposite side of history from you, Garrett, because I liked Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, but I'm more of a fan of the RPG element Assassin's Creed games, especially Odyssey.
Wow.
In particular, that's a game I fell in love with. But I definitely think that while I like the RPG game mechanics in those games, I also definitely think that they add some unneeded bloat, and especially again, it was really evident in Valhalla in particular. So I could definitely understand that.
I think it's not the mechanics themselves too. I think it's just the scaling of them.
Yeah,
they go too far, and I wish. And that's just kind of negative for a lot of RPGs themselves. They can be bloated. They can go too long. But man, like they really did it with Assassin's Creed. And I'm like, I don't want to sit down and play 120 hours of just over and over and over and over again. But I know some people that do. So good for them.
Yeah.
And
exactly. Donnie Reese is one of them. I mean, every time I look over at his timeline, he's tweeting about Assassin's Creed again, or Joey Splash as well.
I'm 700 hours in and I'm still not done with the game. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're making me want to play less and less of this game.
I mean, I got my fill of it because again, when I reviewed it, I played I beat the game in a week and played 60 hours of Assassin's Creed.
That's kind of crazy, actually. That's quite an achievement.
I can't believe I finished it because actually that was the month of Ubisoft for me where I beat back to back Watch Dogs Legion, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and Immortals Phoenix Rising within like a 4 week period. So it's just like it was something. But
I would be done with that.
Last question of the week comes to us from Andrew Semachek on the Discord, who says, Ryan, you and Garrett should do an over-under on how many times the word chaos is mentioned in Stranger of Paradise. No,
chaos.
We're not doing that, Andrew. Chaos. No. We gotta kill chaos, Garrett.
No, Andrew, I don't want to think about a game that, I don't know. I'm fine. Let people enjoy the game. I'm sure some people will. It's not going to be me, though.
I mean, I
definitely
just
not gonna
love
be.
the clip that's been going around recently of like the classic Final Fantasy villain Lich that you fight in the first Final Fantasy game. He's doing this big monologue of who he is and why he's there and what he wants to do, and then the main character just it pans to him and he's like, "I don't care who you are," and he just punches him in the face like mid monologue. So it's just like,
It's
come on,
so cringy, man. I applaud Koei Tecmo for I don't know.
That game's certainly a game that exists. But anyways, Garrett, we got to go. But before we go, Garrett plugs go.
You can follow me on Twitter at Bland Explosion. You can also find me at the Nintendo Shack, part of the Play Some Video Game Podcast Network. We are live on Thursday nights over at twitch.tv/PSVG.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Yumi Caprice, on YouTube at youtube.com/Yumi Capri, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been level 39 of the RPG Cave, and we're out.
Bye-bye.
The RPG Cave's mana is powered by patrons over at patreon.com/Yumi Capri. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you to our over 70 patrons, starting with our Capremium producers, Dallas Ford, Jonathan Brown, the man behind the music on the Xbox Drive and the Nintendo Drive. You can check out his new album, In My Element, over on Apple Music, as well as his website, and Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team. Our platinum producers are Robbie Bobby Miller and Trucker Sloth, and our gold members, Argo, Brandon Myers, Dallas Robbins, Dano, Emily O'Kelly, Foolish Fuji, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Marcus O'Neill, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, RJ Kern, Skinny Matt, Tony Baker, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you all for all of your support, and if you're interested in joining the Patreon, head over to patreon.com/Yumi Capri and pick the tier that's right for you.